I want to tell you a little bit about flat marriage. And flat marriage is with couples who don't use the timeout. And the flat marriage looks like this. And I've got 2 of them in my office now. I'm working through with them. One is a guy who, with his wife for, I guess they've been together probably 20 years now. And they have 3 children. And he's talking to her about leaving the marriage, which is a great crisis for her because 2 of their kids are quite young. And it's very scary, economically and otherwise. And so this guy's a very easygoing guy. He doesn't like conflict. He's a lot like my dad, who would avoid conflict if at all possible. He's pretty easygoing. So he said to me, and this is the sign of a flat marriage. He said to me, I love my wife, but I don't feel in love with her. I love my wife, or I love my husband. The other case I'm seeing is a woman who's gone flat. I love my husband, but I don't feel in love with him. And so that's a very hopeful thing to say, because when a marriage is dead, there's no, I love my husband, but I don't feel in love with him. It's nothing. I only had to see one dead marriage to always remember what it looked like. And there's a vacuum there. It's just for the person who's done. There's nothing anymore. Even if there's lots of anger, there's still potential. It's that flat line. That's the opposite to love, people say is hate. It's not, it's indifference. It's indifference. And so this guy he still loves his wife, but he doesn't feel in love with her. So I said, you know what? I've been married for a long time, and I still feel in love with my wife. And it's very important to me to have that. I call it the buzz. And you want it too, and I think that's good. You should have that if you're going to be married. You shouldn't be going along flat. And so good for you to speak up finally. What took you so long? Because he's one of these guys who took a long time to load up, and he's been sitting here now for a while. Finally couldn't stand it anymore, so he blamed his marriage. And he's feeling he's somewhat depressed, but very flat. So I said to him, so how do you feel about conflicts? He said, I don't like it that much. I said, well, do you speak up if you and your wife have a difference of opinion? And he said, well, no, I tend to be pretty easygoing. But if I really have to speak up, I will. And I said, how often do you do that? 4 times a year, twice a year, 3 times a year? He says, yeah. And when you do it, do you sort of explode over a small thing and make a big deal over nothing? Well, yeah. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Yeah. So does that help you to stay locked up again for a while? Because when you do open up emotionally, it's such a disaster? He said, yeah. I said, so you know why you feel flat for your marriage? It's because you don't have enough courage to tell her you're upset with her. You're afraid to tell her that you're annoyed with her. You're afraid to tell her you're frustrated with her, or you're afraid to tell him that you're frustrated with him. And if you can't talk about the stuff you don't like, the good feelings will go flat too. If you keep the negative feelings in, all the feelings stay in. He says, well, I'm talking to this woman at work, and I feel some kind of a buzz with her. I said, well, she's no threat to you. You talk to anybody for a few minutes, you're going to start to feel a connection with them. That's not love necessarily. You're afraid in this nitty-gritty relationship. So we got the wife in, and we started to open him up. And she always thought there was a lot more going on than he was saying. And she was so pleased he was finally speaking up. And boy, for a guy who's easygoing, had a memory of an elephant. He was bringing up stuff from 20 years ago, all these things that annoyed him. And it was okay to do that because I was in the room protecting him, you see. And his wife's sitting there, and she's getting more and more frustrated. I can see the look on her face, and I'm just assuming she's getting pretty choked here. And if she cuts loose, she's going to slice and dice him. He's going back in his hideout. So I stopped it, and I said to her, how are you doing with all this negative stuff that's finally coming out? And she said, I'm sure glad to hear it. I'm really glad to hear it. I've always thought it was kind of in there, but it is starting to grind me. And I said, well, you're doing amazingly well to listen. So I said to him, buddy, you got to pace yourself. Okay, if you're going to start opening up with negative stuff, you can't just go, rah, rah, rah. She's going to get really upset with you, so let's learn to do it a bit at a time. We were just clearing out the backlog. So I was sort of teasing him a bit. They're doing quite well now. You can say to me, I love my wife, and I'm starting to feel in love with her. The other couple, we're still too early on, and she's really shut down. So I'm not sure she's going to get it back, but we're doing the best we can. I think she might. But that's flat marriage, and it comes from not being brave enough to say what's really on your mind. And if it gets destructive or starts to get crazy, call a timeout, step out, and come back. That saves you. That's your freedom. My dad learned that a long time ago, except he forgot to do the time in. He never got. The next day, they would pretend nothing happened, and so they'd have the same fight again and again. Most psychologists will tell you their parents had some nasty fights. We come to the business through some of our own woundedness. And it's from learning firsthand how to do it maybe better than we saw it done in the past.